There's been many videos made on the Overwatch and TF2 debate. It's a popular subject, as people love rivalries, and people love both Overwatch and TF2, but not always both. However, a trap a lot of these videos fall into is just praising one game while failing to look into any nuances of the game on why different people would prefer one game over the other, or just not look at anything objectively. But I am not special in the slightest, because as it turns out, there has been someone else who has had this desire and has made a video on the subject. Meet Big Citrus, a YouTuber that mainly makes videos on more modern first-person shooters with a primary focus on Overwatch. In this video, he starts it out claiming that he will fulfill the mandate for a more objective review of both games, and that his video is the last one needed to be made on the debate. That's a bit of an egotistical stance, but we'll still hear him out. I'm going to mainly be skipping the introduction and conclusion segments, because those are just mainly framing. But other than that, we're going to be seeing the video and the points in its fullest, so you know I'm not being an unreliable narrator. However, I may reference some points in the introduction occasionally, so if you want further context, you might want to watch the full video after you're done here. One more thing to note is that I am not unbiased. If you look at my content for 5 seconds, you already know which game I prefer. Alright, that's enough background, let's get this show on the road.
I'm going to go in order of what I think is the least important to the most important when it comes to comparing Team Fortress 2 to Overwatch 2. We're going to start with both of the games' live service. In terms of how frequently these games are updated, patched, are the servers good, is there like a good HUD, user interface, or is there a good quality of life and everything throughout the game, and we're just going to look at everything objectively and really give a fair... Yeah, okay, I'm going to give the first point to Overwatch, no surprise. Look, Team Fortress 2 is archaic. The game has been updated once majorly in the last 5 years.
Well, we haven't really arrived at any real points yet, and we already have a main problem of this video. The narration. Not only do you have these sentences ending and then never immediately starting, but you also have these random pauses in between sentences. Again, not really related to what points people are making, but professionals have standards. Also, side note is he never mentions the HUD and user interface in this section, so please do not build up to something that won't have a proper resolution.
You know, Steam common files updated is like the only thing you'll ever see in the patch notes for a Team Fortress 2 update. The game is horribly outdated, like I just said. Overwatch obviously is still being promoted and still updated and has way more better quality of life. It actually has a queue for like custom game modes that are like arcade game modes. It has its own custom game maker and everything that people are able to hop into. And obviously I can't really fault Team Fortress 2 much for this. It's been around forever, and Overwatch has the backing of like Activision Blizzard, who are always trying to dump money into every project they can on the hopes of a turning profit, while Valve realized they basically won at life by making Steam years ago and they never have to fucking try anymore.
Firstly, the notion that TF2 is outdated is so vaguely defined. It is still working, it's not outdated. In which way does it need to modernize? Secondly, while a custom game browser and arcade are more accessible in a way, he fails to mention that TF2 provides greater flexibility for new and more complex modes than anything Overwatch could produce, thanks to the high modding capabilities. There's also a whole conversation to be had about you being able to play TF2 after the servers being shut down inevitably, because player-hosted servers and bot lives would still be available, or how the standard practice of one server being the entire foundation of a game like in Overwatch or Fortnite inherently makes these games doomed from the start. But that's a whole different topic entirely. Third thing I'd like to mention is that he kinda exaggerates how little content TF2 gets. Sure, it's not the same amount of content that was expected in the past, I just generally don't like the bloat of the few updates in terms of how much is given at once. But I'd say that 8 maps in an update is a significant amount. Am I defending Valve's practices in an update? No. But it's important to clarify so you don't give people the wrong idea.
there are still bugs and glitches, and not to mention the amount of bots and cheaters that you will find consistently throughout Team Fortress 2 that they have done negligible things to fix. I know that a lot of Team Fortress 2 fans are gonna get very mad at me for even making this a point and a thing that I am going to give to Overwatch 2, but it does matter for people who are trying to get into new games. Also, the new cosmetics that get added to Team Fortress 2 are cool and everything, but I don't know, I don't really like the Counter-Strike, microtransaction system that they added to Team Fortress 2 in 2016. I've never liked it.
He's bad elaborating on it, but you saw the tiered skin system that artificially increases rarity, which is a bad thing. Essentially, items have their value set by Valve. Something, the house always wins.
Overwatch 2 now has a battle pass, which is kind of shit and everything, but hey, at least it's consistent new stuff every single season as compared to Team Fortress 2. Also, at least Overwatch 2 was a bit of a graphical update and everything, whereas Team Fortress 2 has looked the same forever.
And if it looks good, don't try to break it. You see this happen all the time with remakes, a prime example being the Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary. Bungie had a great visual design in their first Halo game, with a lot of it being lost in 343's remaster. There's a lot of visual clutter that wasn't there before, and it just doesn't look right. TF2 is inherently a stylized game, so I don't think it needs a graphical touch-up. However, I'd like to go back to visual clarity, because that's another major issue with Overwatch that proves that graphics aren't everything. For a game wanting to become a major spectator sport, it sure doesn't give that much of a great spectator experience. Even if you've played the game before, it's very hard to keep track of everything going on in a game of Overwatch due to all the particle effects and things just flying around. So, yeah.
And I know people are gonna get upset by this and everything, but Overwatch does add new heroes, and I do think Team Fortress 2 should have started doing that for a lot of reasons.
For very good reasons. TF2 is a very delicately balanced fulcrum, with classes designed to appeal to almost every type of FPS player. Adding any new characters would ruin this. With new classes, you have characters that overlap with each other, or power creep the old heroes. This happens all the time in Overwatch, where one new character just completely breaks everything. Besides, I'd rather have a few deep characters than a multitude of shallow ones. The fact he decides to make this point really shows that he doesn't appreciate the design of either game and just wants some flashy new stuff. But, who knows, this may be the exception. We'll just keep watching the video.
In a way, I do appreciate that Valve understood that Team Fortress 2 fans didn't really want the game to change much, so they didn't change it, and they didn't need to. People still play it as an active, loyal, core fan base, and it always will. I respect their good, mindset for that. Like, that was smart of them. But man, it's just so much more refreshing to come into a game that's always getting updates and bug fixes and has an actually good anti-cheat, new skins and new items, and just, it is nice.
I'd like to look at this comment on the screen that mentions that not all updates are good, and that shouldn't just be a side note. One of the worst parts of live service games is when the developers preferably overcook their game, and I can argue that Overwatch developers have been doing that for a long time. In fact, that might be a good reason why the TF2 team stopped it for 10 years. The game was already complete enough, and the updates with 8 maps feel bloated. A good analogy is you decide to put more ingredients on a dish while considering that it was already fine. In the end, the dish ends up tasting worse than if you didn't put any ingredients at all.
Now look, I know a lot of people are going to say, you are shitting a lot on Team Fortress 2 already into this video. Like, that's not really fair. Like I said, I'm not going to be unbiased. So the first point does go to Overwatch. But next point...
You literally emphasize in the intro how unbiased you are.
Both of these games have been a huge part of my life, and I don't really have a huge bias leaning in either direction.
How can I trust you in this way?
Look, you might think I'm just going to say, because of all of the horrible, unfortunate things that happened with Overwatch 2's PvE, its cancellation, features being removed, it finally coming out and being underwhelming, and just the general new PvE game modes we've been getting for Overwatch recently not being super dynamic or interesting, you might think that I'm just gonna say, oh, Team Fortress 2 wins this category. And you would be correct.
This may be me reading into this way too much, but the wording of the one-sided live source in Overwatch favors being straightforward and saying, oh, Overwatch is just better, Well, the one-sided matchup in TF2's favor just kind of beats around the bush, really shows that we're not dealing with an unbiased judge that Big Citrus claims he is. Again, take this point with a grain of salt, because I might be looking in too deep, but there's plenty more evidence that this is not an unbiased video that will be mentioned later.
It is really astounding how I really do not think that the brand new PvE missions and PvE content that has came out for Overwatch is different than the fucking Junkenstein's Revenge game mode we got years ago. I mean, I will give credit to Overwatch for adding things like Lucio Ball and May Snowball Offensive, and like all the deathmatch game modes they added. Those game modes had fun maps and were interesting. For like a couple months when they were out, Blizzard recycled these game modes year after year after year, and they did try to change them to their credit, but it didn't matter.
This is all valid criticism for how Overwatch never really changed their events. However, this is a PvE section, and half the modes he's mentioning are completely unrelated to PvE. If this was a side mode section, this would all be fine and dandy, but doesn't really mention any TF2's events or side modes like Scream Fortress, Player Destruction, Payload Rest. You get the idea. Again, Overwatch bias.
Also, for some reason, Blizzard's PvE modes just don't feel fun. The AI feels super passive, just not aggressive at all, and they don't have that many interesting attacks or variation to make it feel like I should come back and play this ever again. Look at a game like Helldivers 2 recently. Despite its server issues, the game is incredibly fun, and it's honestly that kind of 4-player co-op that we've been missing, with things we've been missing.
Alright, quick rant. One of the biggest problems with Big Citrus's videos is the fact that his wording is often awful, which isn't helped by his editing style of just slamming one sentence after another with no regards for periods. There are often too many filler words just stall for time because his thoughts aren't fully collected. There is often him basically repeating himself in the same sentence. And the frequent pauses mid-sentence really make it a pain to listen to sometimes. My main guess for why is either he doesn't have a script, it just swings it, which is a bad idea for an argumentative video. As all when you're trying to make a point, you need a script to fully keep yourself on topic and make a coherent argument. Either that, or he only records one take, which is possible due to later moments in the same video. In short, please either start doing multiple takes, or get to writing. Maybe both, I don't know your process.
Helldivers is one of the very best to ever come out in my opinion, but it's because of how fucking hard and hectic it is. It's always keeping you on your toes, and every time you go up in difficulty, the game gets harder. Overwatch's PvE modes have never had anything like that. Now, look at Team Fortress 2's main PvE mode. I don't know if this is going to be very controversial. I mean, I do actually still play Team Fortress 2 and interact with a lot of the community, so I know that people fucking love Man vs. Machine, but let me just say this. I really honestly mean it when I say I think that Man vs. Machine is the best part about Team Fortress 2, and it's also not plagued by so many of the issues that Team Fortress 2 is currently plagued by, like the server issues and the bots.
First off, there are still bots in a cheating crisis in MVM. Not as disruptive in the main game, but still a problem. Secondly, what server issues? I still have no clue what he means by this, as I play TF2 daily and the servers function perfectly well. It's just bots exist.
Man vs. Machine, honestly, is one of the best horde modes I have ever seen in gaming. People have been playing it for so long that they practically could just play the levels in their sleep, but they're so dynamic and interesting. There's so much good enemy variation, and I love how you actually do become stronger each wave, and you're also able to actually buy different upgrades for the different weapons in the game, and they all have different things. Yeah, there are objectively good playstyles in Man vs. Machine, but there's so many different ways to play that horde mode. It's so fun to be playing something like the Scout and you have to collect all the money because that's what the Scout is good at in that game mode, making sure you don't miss a single fucking dollar because you need every penny you can get for those higher waves. And of course, just having your engineer who's always having the sentry buster come after him and is always having to take care of it to make sure it doesn't kill his buildings, him and his whole fucking team. It helps that even though there are not a lot of maps for Man vs. Machine, they all feel pretty different from one another. I can always hop on Man vs. Machine and have a great time. I legitimately love it. Also, the thrill of possibly getting an Australian weapon also helps because, money. It is thrilling, it is fun, it is replayable, and it does entirely shit on every single game mode Overwatch has ever had.
This is probably the most coherent part of the video argument-wise. A bit shallow, but coherent. And no, it's not just because it praised TF2, it's just because a lot of what's said is objectively correct. Oh hey, like the video says, who would have guessed? Still think Deep Rock Galactic has better PvE though.
Speaking of modes, it's time for this category. Look, I know it's been pretty easy to predict like what my answer is going to be for each category so far and which direction I'm going to lean, and yeah, Overwatch completely stomped on Team Fortress 2 here. So look, I know I haven't been talking about the history of these games much because I've already made a video about the history of Overwatch, and honestly, I don't think the history of Team Fortress 2 is that interesting comparatively.
TF2 does have a lot of interesting history to it in terms of update direction. Otherwise, many TF2 players wouldn't make whole videos on certain updates and their impact. Then again, it could also be because TF2 wasn't a game that was actively sabotaging itself throughout its lifespan, unlike Overwatch.
But yeah, we do have to talk about the Meet Your Match update. For those who are watching who are mainly Overwatch fans, the Meet Your Match update is the update that people brand as killing Team Fortress 2. And yeah, I don't disagree. Do you guys want to know what made me buy Overwatch? It was this update. I'm not joking. Only a couple months after Overwatch's initial release, where it literally became the most popular video game on planet Earth, Team Fortress 2 would finally release an actual competitive mode. And it also brought a lot of other stuff. There was a balance change in everything to try and make the game a little more competitive, and this was one of the biggest like update overhauls that the game ever had. A lot of things were buffed and a lot of things were nerfed, but most people can agree the game became less fun after the balance changes from the Meet Your Match update. And also, the competitive mode that came out for Team Fortress 2 is legitimately one of the worst competitive modes I've ever seen. I'm not going to go into detail because it's just bad.
If you're going to make an argument on why something is bad, you have to bring your best case. It's going to be hard to convince you if you have no real reasons other than, oh, it's just bad, trust me. There are a ton of major problems with TF2's competitive mode that he fails to mention. First, the game forces your graphics to the highest settings. This is terrible for multiple reasons, one of which being the typical player base of TF2. Due to the game being free to play, it naturally attracts a lot of players with low-end PCs. However, due to the requirement to crank the graphics to the highest settings, it ends up locking a ton of people out of playing the mode. Besides, it's kind of made the competitive TF2 players personally make their game look bad, so this doesn't benefit them either. There's also the questionable map pool, which includes a lot of maps that are simply unsuited for competitive play. The worst example of this being Turbine, which is a capture the flag map, which no competitive player touches with a 20-foot pole. And there's the lack of class limits, so you can end up making matches come to a complete halt by stacking engineers. Don't forget this is a Valve game, so cheating is still a problem. And if all of this wasn't bad enough, a single player leaving just destroys the lobby, meaning all of the people waiting in queue was just for nothing. He could have mentioned any of these points, but I'll just let him speak on this matter.
Team Fortress 2 is not a competitive game on the same level that Overwatch is. Overwatch was designed with it in mind. Team Fortress 2 was made to be fun and wacky. That's what Valve was good at. Look, Team Fortress 2 has a lot of tech. The amount of time it takes to truly master a character is incomprehensible. It takes thousands of hours. Trust me, I fucking know this. But as a competitive game, it doesn't work. It's mostly RNG, not even to mention random crits. In case you don't know, there are just randomly, you'll just score a critical hit in Team Fortress 2. It feels a lot more often than not. That's a fun debate, by the way. My 2 cents is, I think random crits are funny, so they belong in Team Fortress 2. That's honestly what I think. But in a competitive setting, they should never ever exist. It's just getting a free kill for no reason, basically.
This entire section is comprised of misinformation. First of all, it doesn't matter if a game was designed to be competitive. People will make it competitive for it if they're passionate about a game. Super Smash Bros. Wasn't made to be competitive, yet here it has a competitive scene. Minecraft's PvP is scuffed to say the least, yet there was a passionate community who made big events for Minecraft PvP and minigames. The main reason TF2's competitive scene failed to take off was Meet Your Match being so bad it permanently damaged the perception of the competitive scene. Either that, or the fact that TF2's competitive mode is so divorced from how most people play the game that there wasn't much interest in the first place. Combine the fact that playing TF2 competitively is a hassle to do. If you want to play the competitive format of Super Smash Bros., you go to settings, turn on all the settings using competitive formats, and you're good. Pick a flat stage and play like the pros. As for Minecraft, the standard PvP experiences created by the community became the competitive formats used by events like Minecraft Mondays and Minecraft Championships, and are hosted by major servers that are easy to access. Just find a server, join the game, and you're good to go. To play competitive TF2, you need a specific custom server with custom ban lists and 11 other people. Needless to say, playing competitive TF2 outside a bad matchmaking system requires jumping through a ton of hoops. Secondly, random crits are not in competitive TF2, not in the main game mode, nor in the community-made events. This entire section is based on a baseless lie that's honestly baffling to see from someone who's apparently competed Highlander events.
And honestly, the weapon meta in Team Fortress 2 is just horrible, and it feels pay to win. If you were someone who downloaded Team Fortress 2 and was trying to get into the competitive mode and you didn't have the right weapons, it's not possible.
Once again, this is a bunch of misinformation, and he probably knows this because he puts a subtitle that clarifies stock weapons are usually better. You can't even download TF2 and immediately jump into competitive. It doesn't let you. Stock loads are completely viable and are often just the meta, and even at higher levels, the weapon meta can be somewhat flexible. One more thing of note is the atrocious word overuse of honestly, which is starting to drive me up a wall.
The format was bad. The way you ranked up and lost points was similar to Counter-Strike Go. Bad. It was really bad.
He doesn't really elaborate on why these two are bad. The format is really vague word usage and refer to editing, from the game being 6v6, which is perfectly fine and functional for the record, or to how there are no class lists, which is a fair complaint. I also don't know how CSGO's ranking system works, so I'm completely in the dark about that. This is why explaining things is important.
Overwatch's competitive mode, while it has issues and it's gone under a lot of changes, and how it feels really shitty when you're going on a loss streak and sometimes the matchmaking is just putting you with people that expects you to carry, punishing you anyways when you lose, there have been a lot of issues with Overwatch's ranking system, but it is leaps and fucking bounds above Team Fortress 2's. It actually functions most of the time. It feels rewarding for the players who have the most skill, and it actually feels like worth it to climb. I don't even know what the ranks in the Team Fortress 2 competitive mode were. Do you?
This is one of those egregious sections in the entire video, as it spends the entire runtime basically going TF2 bad, which would be fine because the ranked mode in TF2 is downright dysfunctional. However, he gets all the reasons wrong and fumbles what should be an easy opportunity to seem credible. Also, these run-on sentences are really starting to get on my nerves. It's clear at this point there's no method to this madness. Let's hope that this was the weakest section of the video.
Alright, we're gonna start getting into more of how the games actually felt and everything. But one more thing we gotta talk about before we talk about how the games actually played, and that is the fan bases. Now, you might say, why the hell do the fan bases matter, Citrus? That has nothing to do with the game. I'll tell you why. All of you motherfuckers are insufferable.
That's not really a good justification for why it matters. A better way to justify talking about the fanbase would be the fact that you interact with them in literally every match, but nope. Again, fumbling the easy bag.
As someone who loves both of these games and has been in both of these fan bases for most of their life, I can tell you, I love you guys, but holy shit, you need to shut the fuck up sometimes. Look, this is actually, in my opinion, the hardest section in this video, because my gut says the Team Fortress 2's fanbase is worse. But then again, Overwatch's fanbase is so flaky. Team Fortress 2 supporters have literally been supporting this game. A lot of them for over a decade, like myself personally. A lot of casual Overwatch fans who just played it when it was popular couldn't even last half a decade. And a lot of people who still play Overwatch play it every single day, but bitch about it non-stop. To be fair, Team Fortress 2 fans do that as well. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't like Team Fortress 2 fans because a lot of them are furries. Well, Overwatch has a lot of weird fans in it in itself. Not trying to call furries weird or anything, but you know, like, just like a little bit it is. Not judging. It's okay to be weird.
Him talking about weird fans seems very hypocritical when you consider... Just look at his thumbnails. Or don't. It's a bad idea to look.
Even in the What Show's video, he even really admitted that Team Fortress 2 fans complain a lot more about the game than they do praising it. Like, yes, there is just people who blindly praise the game, but that's because it's their favorite game and they really like it, and there is nothing else out like it. And I honestly kind of understand where those people are coming more than the people who are always shitting on Team Fortress 2. Yes, the game has tons of bots and glaring issues and needs updates, and Valve should fix these things because they are worth so much money and it would be so easy. Valve is never going to fix Team Fortress 2. Legitimately, if Valve ever releases an update that foolproof fixes TF2 and actually releases a new update within the next 2 years, I'll run a fucking marathon.
First thing to note is him complaining about other people complaining. This would make some sense for him, considering he was once a D1 Overwatch meat writer. Defending someone who was baffling parts of Overwatch 2, like the new monetization system, but criticism is important. The bot crisis isn't going to get fixed if we just sit around like good little boys and stay quiet. Yet that's why people complain. Secondly, TF2 is starting to get some significant content in the form of new maps in Smithmas and summer updates, which is the result of complaining, by the way. However, that has also gone into another issue of the amount of new content being downright overwhelming to the point it's not an uncommon pain that Scream Fortress is no longer worth it. Let's be real, maps in a single update is kind of ridiculous.
I'm gonna say something really quickly. When it comes to which fan base is better at video games, I'm sorry, it is Overwatch players. But that's because Team Fortress 2 players are a lot more focused on having fun and actually enjoying themselves as compared to where Overwatch players are more masochistic and love getting their balls stepped on all the time, myself included.
What was the point of this segment? It completely comes out of nowhere, messes with the flow of the video, it isn't relevant to the video at all, and how do you even prove which fan base is better than another? He also contradicts this point numerous times throughout the video, often saying that TF2 lobbies are a sweat fest. If you're going to put in a random tangent, at least make it so it doesn't actively contradict what you're saying.
And that's honestly the biggest divide between the two games, is fun and actually functioning as a PvP game.
The entire point of a PvP game is to be both fun and functional, but fun always comes first. By this logic, Overwatch has already lost. Again, this probably isn't what he literally means. It could just be that he's terrible at wordings, which... yeah, that's probably more likely.
Overwatch released a new update which really tried to fix competitive and fix the game. The matches take less time, and also so you're not dying to one-shot abilities as much, which it actually did successfully. So, good job, Overwatch. And even then, I still see Overwatch fans complaining about this new update. They also fixed the rank mode, and they're still bitching. Overwatch fans, I swear to God, literally will complain about anything. A new skin gets updated or changed, complain about it. A character gets a minor nerf that it's needed for years, people will complain about it. A character who didn't really need to get buffed will finally get a buff, and then people will complain that, oh, it's not even that good, it's not even worth it.
Again, complaining about criticism. Some points he brings up can be considered valid, but all the legitimate complaints that could be brought up just gets hand-waved in a text box that's only on the screen for 3 seconds. One of the examples of an unfair complaint is someone being mad at the state of tanks, which is completely fair because those guys have been in internal pain for quite a while, to the point they had to cut one because nobody wanted to play tanks.
Team Fortress 2 fans will literally come at the sight of anything being added to the game. Even cosmetic updates in Scream Fortress, which is really boring now, they still get excited for. Like, I wish I got that excited for anything. I honestly wish I was as easy to please as some Team Fortress 2 fans. Don't even mean that as an insult.
Keyword, some TF2 fans. Because from what I see, people getting super excited over literally anything is a small, vocal minority brought to the forefront by community figureheads. Again, refer back to many TF2 fans deciding to no longer do Scream Fortress contracts, also including some large community figureheads.
When it comes to which fan bases are nicer, Team Fortress 2 likes to act like it has this really accepting fan base and everything. When I hopped on over the past few days, I don't know, the amount of people who named their guns horribly racist or horribly xenophobic things, the amount of people just linking gore videos and text chat and just horrible shit was fucking insane. Team Fortress 2 fans are mostly just edgelords who never left the year 2007, who've been stuck there for over 15 years, and it's just embarrassing to watch how some of these people act.
First, most content of TF2's player base don't paint them in an accepting light, as you often see memes about TF2 players spamming the N-word in the voice chat or something crazy like that. Secondly, I don't believe that you encountered that number of toxic players in that short time, merely because of the gore video comment. People putting literal porn on a sign, that's believable. I've seen people do that way too many times to count. But gore? No. The majority of TF2 matches are filled with normal people that don't act too well unless it's for a bit. The genuinely racist people are usually just ejected from the server by the same people who are still there. I'd also like to believe he generally has a more biased views of gamers being all bigots that's typical of certain progressives. As his previous video on Mercy says at one point 1/3 of gamers are bigoted. Now that I kind of think of it, his speech power is kind of similar to Jim Sterling's, who has similar progressive anti-gamer politics. There's also the use of anecdotal evidence, which is flimsy because I can also argue that the Overwatch fanbase is typically more ableist, due to me receiving multiple negative comments about my character choice being related to autism. But you and I know that's a whole lot of crap, so let's not make those arguments.
I do hate the notion that Team Fortress 2 outlived Overwatch twice. It never even killed it once.
But the simple fact that Team Fortress 2 indeed did outlive Overwatch. Granted, I find the notion of Overwatch 2 being dead kind of dumb, as it clearly isn't, but the Overwatch 1 getting outlived argument still holds up.
I'm sorry, if we're gonna talk on a number basis, Overwatch has always shit on TF2. Even at TF2's peak, it was never as big as Overwatch. Even at the lowest point of Overwatch, it was still bigger than TF2. And that's because Valve didn't want TF2 to be the biggest thing. Blizzard wanted Overwatch to literally be the biggest game in the world, the biggest esport in the world. And because of that, there are so many more people in the Overwatch fandom that you will meet that have different perspectives. And sometimes it's cool and everything. But because of that, a lot of them have this really weird elitist personality about fucking everything, man. I don't know. It's so hard to say.
Honestly, a lot of the time when people argue that TF2 was always way smarter than Overwatch, I don't believe it anymore, due to how many times I've been shown monthly or daily total players for Overwatch, and it being compared with how many people play TF2 at the moment. Like, no duh, the amount of people who play TF2 in a certain moment doesn't compare to the amount of Overwatch players who have played a single round today, or in a month. There are Steam charts to consider where Overwatch couldn't crack the top 10, which Overwatch fans would argue that Steam would be the smallest minority of the player base, but once again, I doubt that a little, because Steam is literally the biggest PC gaming platform, and I don't think the player base boost would be that little. Even if you want to go to the Overwatch's bigger art, which, still fair enough, a better explanation would be that Overwatch is also a console game, which console players are a large portion of the player base. Or maybe this is all co-op, I don't know for sure, because Blizzard doesn't show their player numbers. Or maybe because player numbers don't matter at all, and this is all pointless. Also, are you really going to ignore the latest portion of Overwatch's player base? Because to be completely honest, that's just as big as a problem, if not more of a problem, in the Overwatch community as racists are in the TF2 community.
A lot of Overwatch and Team Fortress 2 overlaps. You know, there's always the Soldier Mercy, duo queue in both games. There's always the people who try to, go friendly and quick play and unrated and everything and just ultimately kind of just be annoying and ruin the match.
Never encountered a single friendly in my 200 plus hours of Overwatch, so I played the 5th.
There's always that one really, edgy spy or Genji player who thinks the entire fucking lobby and the entire match is about them. And of course, there are the people who are just interested with the lore of both of these universes. Sidebar, I don't know why it always has to be Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch. Why can't both of these games coexist? And then I look at the fandoms of both of these games, and then I am immediately reminded why they can't coexist, because you motherfuckers are miserable, and you hate each other.
Something to note about the Team Fortress 2 versus Overwatch Discord is that the main reason it exists is because people like rivalries. They're entertaining, as you get to see two things so similar yet so different clash against each other to see which is the superior version. It's also a staple of the gaming world with stuff like Mario vs. Sonic, PlayStation vs. Xbox, Call of Duty vs. Halo. The list goes on. Sure, it's petty, but it's also good fun. As for the con on how both fanbases can't coexist without being one and the same, I fundamentally disagree, and that's because how both games create their communities. Team Fortress 2 is by design a very expressive game, which is why you're both allowed to cover yourself in pride pins or put a swastika on a sign. Yes, these are both semi-common occurrences. It's also a game that puts the individual player experience first, with classes designed for any type of player, from the pyro being made for people with bad connection, to the engineer being for people who would rather play an RTS. Therefore, you see people more willing to express themselves and their colorful personalities, and it's harder to find a player base fully because of this. In Overwatch, on the other hand, is a game that pushes itself towards esports and basically focuses most of its major content towards competitive modes. In fact, the cosmetic system was once tied to watching Overwatch League games. There's also heavy moderation to make sure nobody steps out of line. People are going to be a little more careful with what outrageous things they say. You've also got the whole appeal of the game, allowing you to play as a lot of different heroes, which feel instantly empowering with their movement and abilities, and all provide some sort of fantasy. And this is especially appealing to people who view themselves very highly. What you get is a constant stream of tryhards and people with big egos coming to Overwatch, since that's the kind of player it attracts and creates. Bottom line is, no, these families are not one and the same, only on surface level interactions.
But, if you had to ask me, simply because of the gatekeeping and the nostalgia glasses and just how insufferable it is almost always to hear, I do have to say I think Overwatch's fan base is marginally better. I feel like both of the fan bases do have some self-deprecating humor. They know that they've been playing a game that has been laughed at and made fun of so much, but they still love it. But I feel like Team Fortress 2 fans, it's always from an aura of smugness, where with Overwatch fans, it's usually just a general appreciation for the game that they love. And that's the biggest difference for me.
How does he manage to outdo us in conclusion in terms of setting stuff up without elaborating, and manage to still make it worse by contradicting everything that he said? The whole point of the conclusion statement is to stop everything you said in the section. The gatekeeping and nostalgia glasses statement come completely off nowhere, and Overwatch also has somewhat of a gatekeeping problem. The amount of times I've seen Overwatch players dismiss genuine criticism of the game by pointing out the critic in question has a rank below Diamond is innumerable. He also contradicts himself by saying TF2 fans share a more genuine appreciation for the game in the same state, only to now say it comes from a place of smugness, and vice versa for Overwatch. This entire section, I swear. Alright, it's clearly getting a bit heated over all this bull crap that's being thrown at me. So how about we take a break from all the arguments and talk about something else, like video editing, or specifically, the editing of this video. This is technically unrelated to the rest of the script, however it's still a very important part of the video overall. I'm not sugarcoating it, the editing of this video is awful. The purpose of video editing is to help make the video more watchable by providing useful visuals to demonstrate points and clean up certain parts of the pre-recorded footage and recordings to make the video generally more pleasing on the eyes and ears. But you already knew this, so how does Big Citrus fail at video editing? The first major problem is how he puts his recordings into the video. Usually when you speak, there's a gap between one sentence you say and another. This is how periods and sentences work in general. However, this does not apply in a Big Citrus video, because as soon as one sentence ends, another begins. My viewers used to have this problem when transitioning from one section to another, but I realized that was crazy and purposely made a gap between both sentences that fits my typical speech pattern. There's also audio splices mid-sentence, which at this point is downright inexcusable. For this reason, the previously mentioned whack speech patterns It was a nightmare to write down what he was saying. There's also the problem of him mainly relying on other people's videos to fit as visual content, and the aspect ratio is getting weird as a result. The worst part is, this is an easy fix, as you can just simply take the video and zoom it in. It's like a simple 2 clicks or something. I'm not even using a super expensive editing software. I use DaVinci Resolve for my videos, which is free. He also uses a lot of images to try to demonstrate points, which is good. However, a lot of the time they're very low quality, which is typically not what you want in a visual medium. The MVM upgrade screen is particularly a bad example. I go take a screenshot of the upgrade screen in-game, crop it, and get a higher quality image. It's not particularly difficult, so the only reason I see him doing this is because he's either lazy, stupid, or plain ignorant. Finally, something weird I noticed is the inconsistent transitions, as he starts using plain cuts in the first half of the video and during a good amount of the second half, but later he starts using fades to white? I don't really know what to say at this point. Bottom line is, this video has a ton of editing problems, and I don't think it would be that difficult to fix most of them. Big Citrus, if you're watching this, please put more effort into your editing. And this is coming from a guy who used to do the bare minimum. Alright, sign it over. Back to the video.
I've tried to talk about both games a fair amount in this video, and now it's time to probably talk about the most important aspect of both of these games, in my opinion, and that's the characters. So, we've reached the big one. The big ol' argument about which game has the better characters, has the better classes, the better heroes. This is really part of the video where it's time to quote-unquote get objective and look at quote-unquote the facts and really break it down. Team Fortress 2 only has 9 classes as compared to Overwatch's almost 40.
3 words. Quality over quantity. The variation in TF2's gameplay doesn't come from adding in more characters, but rather allowing you to get more out of these 9 classes. He'll mention this later, but TF2's classes are customizable with different weapons and different combinations of said weapons to create new playstyles and sometimes even redefine the class itself. Additionally, the general playstyles of TF2's classes are more flexible, meaning you're not stuck into the same box that Overwatch typically forces its players into. Overall, the TF2 has 9 classes argument falls completely flat when you realize it fails to account for depth.
There's a bit of a decent argument. Do we look at the characters that both games had on release? Which, Team Fortress 2 has always had the same 9 classes, and Overwatch only started with about 20 or so heroes at its initial release in 2016. Do we look there? Do we also compare the older versions of these characters, or do we only compare the current versions and also the newer heroes in Overwatch? I'm not going to look into metas necessarily too much. I'm not going to look into the history. I am more so going to really try to look at these characters on a base design standpoint. But, technically, the title of the video is Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch 2 compared, so I will be looking at the newer Overwatch heroes.
This entire section is padding. Nobody urges that we should look at what both games used to be. I hate having my time wasted, so please get to the point.
I think if there's one thing that both of these games have been praised for continuously, it is their character design. We've had other hero-esque shooter games come out like Valorant and Apex Legends, and I gotta be real, I don't really fuck with a lot of the characters in these games. The initial batch they usually come out with has like 3 or 4 really good ones. All of the characters that get updated or added later are always just meta-breaking and or useless.
He opens this part like he's going to talk about the visual design of the characters, but then moves on to gameplay for some reason? Also, why add the and to the and/or? You can't have a character be both useless and meta-breaking. That's a blatant contradiction. This is a nitpick for sure, but it's also another example of his poor word choice.
Valor and Apex have Mirage and Yoru, which I love Mirage. I'll never really talk shit on Mirage, but he's kind of useless. And they have the meta-breaking characters that define the game for a number of years, like Seer and Chamber, that are just must-picks, and there's no reason not to play them. And the initial fun characters that launch with the game that are slowly worsened over time, like Jet and Wraith, because they stomp on the casuals a bit too hard. And then there's just a handful of characters that are kind of good, but just boring to play. Same thing goes for like Rainbow Six Siege as well. And like a lot of these characters come out with the mindset of, oh, they can't be too bad or they can't be too OP instead of just being fun. They're always made from a balancing standpoint rather than from a standpoint of actually just being fun, enjoyable characters usually. Where I feel like Overwatch and Team Fortress 2, they really just designed it with, alright, what characters are going to be useful but also fun to play? They do a very good job of that with all of these characters, even the newer Overwatch heroes to an extent. We'll go in order here. We'll start with Team Fortress 2. Team Fortress 2, like I said, has 9 classes. They're split into 3 sections of 3 by offense, defense, and support. It's a little harder to talk about the Team Fortress 2 classes. A lot of their playstyles are strictly determined by what weapons you're using, because unlike Overwatch, characters actually have different weapons and loadouts that they don't just spawn in with every time and will vastly change how they play. I mean, Demo Knight is basically just a separate class from Demo Man, if we're being honest.
I disagree with the notion that the playstyle of TF2's classes are entirely dependent on unlockable weapons. A lot of TF2's classes are flexible, meaning you can often go for completely different ways to play different classes. Sure, you can play Scout by going fully aggressive and going for every pick, or you can play Scout near the back in order to protect them from oncoming threats and make them faster, which is an actual role in competitive TF2. It's also the same thing with Soldier, as while most soldiers opt to go for gunboats, there are 2 separate roles in Rover or Pocket, where one goes in for more aggressive plays to regain Uber advantage, and the Pocket stays near his back to make sure he doesn't die. Spies might take 1 kill and then reset back to a safe position, or they may go for broke and try to stab everyone in the area. Demoman could use their sticky bombs for traps, or spam them into the enemy team. I could go on, but the main point is that TF2 classes already provide the possibility of multiple playstyles without any weapons needed.
So, without getting too much into the separate playstyles, I do love that they exist. It does feel like a lot of weapons are just objectively better than the stock weapons, mostly the melee weapons for the Medic and the Pyro. But for the most part, you can really customize a lot of play, and there's a lot of weapons that are specifically better for higher skill players, and a lot of weapons that are better for lower skill players.
Putting the Natasha on screen when talking about weapons better for higher skill players should be a crime. Yes, I know it's not as footage, but that's why it's important to make good visuals instead of relying on others, because then it harms the quality of the video.
All of the classes in Team Fortress 2 have some sort of high-level tech that you can master, unless you're playing, like, the Heavy. Sorry, Heavy. There's, of course, the insane rocket jumping, which would have pheromones crying in their hoodies if they had to try and master this bullshit. Of course, there's the illustrious spy art of the face stab, because the hitboxes in Team Fortress 2 definitely aren't broken.
First off, pheromones not being able to do something that's a requirement for Soldier kind of goes against what you said about Overwatch players being better. The next mistake is completely misrepresenting what a trick stab is and how TF2's hitboxes function. The visual he showed on screen wasn't a representation of the cast's different hitboxes, but how the spy's disguise doesn't change the hitbox of the spy. I mean, if you disguised as Scout and got shot where the Scout's head was with a sniper rifle, you wouldn't take critical damage. Here's what the actual hitboxes look like, so we got that out of the way. Now, the real thing that makes trick stabs possible is the fact that the back hitbox is literally just the back half of any of the Merc's hitboxes. Meaning you can trick players into looking away to stab to the back. Face stabs are also definitely a real thing, but it's more of a weird way on how lag compensation works, and server-side hitboxes don't match up exactly with what you see. Lag compensation doesn't just affect stabs either, example being this headshot I did not deserve to get.
The sniper is actually being able to aim. Demo Man is just being a mid-air pill shot god. Pyro kind of the same thing with the flare gun and doing fun little flare jumps. And the engineer has about 900 Uncle Dane videos you can watch to learn everything about that character.
Hey, quick head up. I'm just going to speed up this video a bit at this time because honestly, a lot of the things he said to the section are kind of obvious recasts of TF2's character design. So, yeah, we're going to get to the parts where I actually have objections or points to make.
As long as you usually work as a team and are focusing on the objective and everything, you'll usually get far. Like, Medic at his basic level, I think, is a really amazing design. I honestly think the Medic in this game is the best designed character. It's either the Medic or the Scout for me. They both do very simple things, but they're both very effective with obvious weaknesses. Of course, you can try and be a funny person and go battle Medic in Team Fortress 2, which sometimes is effective, but for the most part, Medic is just meant to heal people and get good Uber charges, which are basically his ultimate. A lot of times in a lot of public Team Fortress 2 matches, you will literally just have 1 or 2 people playing Medic, and sometimes not even that. So when you're that one Medic and you're the one guy keeping like 10 other people alive, it honestly is a great feeling, and it requires a lot of good positioning on your part and game awareness. It's a very simple character, but he's super effective, and I do like the overhealth mechanic, but hey, we'll talk about game mechanics later. The Scout as well is insanely fast and has a small ass hitbox, and if you can get in someone's face, you can do insane damage. Otherwise, he's made of fucking paper. Glass cannon, great character design, love it. Pyro is the easy to use W mouse 1 character, but he has a lot of fun weapons and playstyles, and is always just generally kind of fun. Plus, air blasting enemies, rockets, and grenades back at them will never not be fun. The heavy is Bastion, he just shoots turret, but hey, he's very fun to push objectives with, and he's very good at that. Engineer is the turret gnome, but engineer mains hate that, phrasing. He's so much more than that. One thing I do actually love about the engineer is his capabilities as an offensive, defensive character. Like, he can set up teleporters and get his team in, and when they need to fall back to heal and get ammo, he has a dispenser, which gives them both. Of course, turrets to guard when his teammates come into the teleporter. It's great.
The description that it gives of Engineer more characterizes them as a support class than an offensive class, which is a fine description of him, but don't set up one thing if you're going to follow it up with something different.
The Demo Man has so much fun playstyles, and he is the best defensive character in the game when you're actually playing him using his sticky bombs, which are just fucking ridiculous. But hey, if you actually play around him, he is an easy counter. You see where I'm going with it.
Him characterizing Demoman as a defensive specialist with his stock glow is a bit dishonest. Demoman is more made as a generalist, which doesn't really have any hard counters, making him great for a ton of different situations.
The Spy is the edgy man's character, disguising, going invisible, and backstabbing, and honestly, actually being able to pull off, like, being stealthy with the Spy is something that is insanely fun to do. Disguising is just the right person and pretending to act like that class and just coming out of nowhere and just mop up some backstab kills is one of the most thrilling experiences in TF2. The Sniper is very basic and everything. He snipes, okay? But he's fun. And I like that he's just strictly a character that is mostly based off of skill. You can hit shots, you'll do good as the Sniper. That's pretty much it. Those are 9 very basic classes, and in combination together, they all kind of serve a purpose, and all classes are kind of meant to counter each other in a way. Counterpicking is obviously a huge fucking deal in Overwatch. But when it comes to Team Fortress 2, I think it's just simpler because of the smaller class pool. The Sniper is really good at shitting on the heavy and medics, because when they're always trying to walk in the front line, Sniper is able to just take them out with some very nicely placed headshots and everything, and just really able to do a great job there. And then obviously the Spy and the Scout are kind of meant to get in the Sniper's face and, just shit on him. Another great counter to the Scout are classes like the Engineer. It is very hard to outrun that turret, and that turret with your low HP will fucking wipe you straight up. But then again, the Engineer has a lot of counters. Someone who's supercharged should come in and take out all of his equipment. Someone with a randomly placed crit rocket or grenade takes out all of his equipment.
Crits and mini crits don't affect buildings. Sure, they might kill the Engineer repairing the building so you can take it out more easily, but a crit rocket does the same damage to a building as a normal rocket.
Speaking of grenades and everything, the Soldier and the Demo Man are, great at pushing points and everything. They're explosives and being able to clear out closed-in rooms. You want to know who's great at playing in closed-in rooms? The Pyro. The Pyro is able to air blast the rockets and the grenades and the stickies right back at him. You kind of see where I'm going with this and everything. But it's fun because, let's say, for example, there is a heavy posted up on a dispenser with a weapon like the Brass Beast, which makes you do more damage when you're basically not fucking moving. And you're like, fuck, they have a really strong hold. He's got a medic and a dispenser pocketing him. And they have a Pyro spy checking in the room for spies to come in and try to destroy the equipment. What can we do?
Alright, this is a bit of a nitpick, but the Brass Beast doesn't do more damage when you don't move. Rather, it does more damage at the cost of you not being able to move that much while being revved up. It's a harmless mistake. Let's just get back to the video.
Well, if you can work really well with your medic and come in as like a uber charged like Demo Man or like a Crits Krieg soldier, you're going to be able to just absolutely wipe the floor with everyone in there since they can't kill you or you do too much damage for them to survive. 2 people in a match can sometimes make all of the difference. Someone running out of a room to go chase a scout and him successfully baiting them and then getting a quick one shot, or just someone like a scout or a spy or a soldier rocket jumping to an objective and backcapping it, or just that one engineer who had a turret right in the ass corner of a point that no one expected that kills 3 people. Just things like that. For the most part, there is so much good counterplay in Team Fortress 2. However, the classes do still feel all a little bit bullshit because of the existence of random critical hits, which I've already briefly mentioned. We'll talk a little bit more about. One thing about Team Fortress 2 is, honestly, I don't think a single class necessarily feels better than one another. Sometimes it kind of depends on what weapons you're using, and a lot of the time, more than anything, it depends on how you're actually all playing as a team. If you have like 15 people in a lobby that are all actually trying to win a match, it is very hard to stop that team. Another cool thing about Team Fortress 2 classes is that you can have multiple people on one team playing the same character, but they're all kind of playing a different play style. I'm not going to say these classes are perfect, though. Depending on certain situations, a lot of classes just aren't very impactful. I guess my ultimate biggest issue is that I feel like in Overwatch, sometimes you can kind of force a play style if you're just playing well enough. But because of how strong certain things are in Team Fortress 2, like sticky bombs and turrets and overheal and one-shot abilities from the sniper and the spy, it sometimes just feels like certain play styles are just never ever going to work, and you just have to change it up. Whereas in Overwatch, if you're playing like super fucking well and your team's kind of helping you, you can usually make any play style work. I think it's mostly due to the 5v5 format, which I ultimately do kind of prefer, but hey, we'll talk about game mechanics later. Okay, moving on.
From experience, I feel like the opposite is true. Sure, in both games there's moments where you're a bit locked out of being able to do certain things, but in Overwatch, if the enemy just decides that they hate you, they just counter swap and basically force you to play a different character, which is the definition of forcing to change it up. In TF2, you'd usually make any class or playstyle work for the most part by carefully playing around the enemy team and your counters. However, if you're locked out of a playstyle, that also means the enemy composition has a massive weakness. You could exploit and force the enemy back into a reasonable composition.
So, Overwatch heroes. Man, oh fucking man. Now, I haven't talked too much about like lore or like character design really quickly, and there's a reason that I was saving that until the Overwatch segment of the video. And that is because I feel like I really need to compare how the Overwatch heroes are designed, like a design and looks and character standpoint, as compared to actual gameplay. Is the reason we did the gameplay section first.
But we're not doing the gameplay section first for Overwatch? Whatever, it's his video. He gets to structure it how he wants to. Let's just see if he's going to be talking out his butt or not.
Because I feel like a lot of the Overwatch heroes are kind of over-designed, in my opinion. This is something that people have complained about for a long time when it comes to Overwatch, and I honestly think it's still an issue. I'm just going to use the easy example and say, look at the Team Fortress 2 heroes. These are very simple designs, and they've been around for a while, and they're still iconic. I'm not going to say some of the Overwatch designs aren't as memorable or iconic and everything. I feel like a lot of the initial hero designs are legendary for characters like Tracer, Reinhardt, Soldier, Diva, Widowmaker, Genji. I just feel like a lot of these designs are just like iconic and everyone knows them and everybody loves them. And a lot of them are very flashy, there's a lot going on and everything, but it just feels so cool and it really goes to that kind of futuristic world that Overwatch was going for. But then there are some heroes that I'm just like, this is too much. And that also comes to the backstory and lore of a lot of these characters. A lot of these characters have voice lines they all say to each other and everything, and it's all trying to make the world of Overwatch feel super important and everything, but I always feel like it's kind of just bloated and unnecessary. I love the story in the world of Overwatch. I wish they did more with it, and there was so much cool stuff that they can do, but I just feel like that's not the kind of game that they're going to be able to make anymore. Those old cinematics that would drop had people hooked, and they were so interested in the lore and the story, but they kept adding more. But instead of developing a story and like world with these characters, they just kept adding more and more and more stuff, and they just never got to actually finish or progress anything. With the Team Fortress 2 characters, you don't really need to know the lore of these characters. It's more focused on their personality and everything. And you get a lot of who they are and where they come from their exuberant personalities.
Huh. This is actually a really good section with interesting points. And I agree with both of them, so this is probably the best part of the video. Alright then, let's see if he keeps this up.
Like, you listen to a lot of the medic's voice lines, and you can tell, okay, something's fucking wrong with this dude. You get the kind of impression that something has been wrong with him for a while, and he's not a very trustable doctor. Kind of same thing with the spy. You listen to his voice lines and you know, okay, this is a guy who has been an assassin for a while and probably likes seducing women and fucking people's wives. And you know what? You look into his story and that tracks. Like, you know what I mean?
I probably don't think that's an impression you get from the spy, at least for me. The only real voice lines that signal to this would be the Xbox Live voice line from Donnie as Scout, but that could be hand-waved as a Scout and Spy's massive beef with each other, so yeah, that checks out.
You get a very good impression of them from just playing the characters and not even having to look deeper into it.
Hey, again, we're going to be speaking Drew's section because he's been kind of saying more of what he's been saying for the past, I don't know, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know how long it's been going on. Let's just skip this part a bit.
And also, another thing that gives a great impression of who the Team Fortress 2 classes are is a lot from their other playstyles and other weapons. Like, you see Heavy with his boxing mitts and everything. They're like, oh, maybe he used to be a boxer. Demo Knight, obviously, you know, really tracing back to Demo Man's Scottish origins. And a lot of the Scouts, like, baseball-themed stuff and everything, paying homage to the fact that he used to play, like, baseball and everything. And, you know, really making that, like, a part of his character. And I kind of like that they don't really ever gone too deep into the lore for too many characters. Like, Pyro. Who are they? Who did they used to be? Are they a boy or a girl? Are they both? What the fuck's going on? We don't really know that much about the Pyro, and the mystery keeps the character more interesting and ambiguous. There is lore to Team Fortress 2 with characters like Saxon Hale. It's more of just a backdrop to kind of explain a couple things and just have a bit of a world to kind of build some things off of, more so than being a huge part of the game and giving, you know, certain characters entire reasons for existing and entire personalities to live off of, like in Overwatch. Look, I love the expansive world Overwatch, but this is a PvP multiplayer game, and yeah, that shit's all really cool, and it's one reason a lot of casual fans got really into Overwatch, and that was great, but they haven't done much with it, and now it kind of just feels a bit bloated and a bit like extra fat on the game. When it comes to like their voice lines and personalities and everything, some characters have iconic voice lines. Some of them will always try to give lore dumps and say, oh, that's from my father, or oh, you remember that one time you did that one thing? That was revenge. Or it's like, ah, just like back in Cuba. Remember when we used to do that mission together, other Overwatch person? And sometimes those interactions are cool, and sometimes it kind of just feels like, well, this character doesn't really have a personality, so we're just gonna have them say things with this lore and the story instead. I think for the Team Fortress 2 characters, with how the different teams are and everything, the red and the blue, I honestly think they designed these characters perfectly. Very stripped back and basic design. You can customize it with cosmetics. Overwatch players do the same thing, and a lot of the times you look at a skin for a character and you're like, why wasn't that just the stock design for this character?
Probably to fit the art style. While you can or some Overwatch skins look better than the main design, they sure don't look like they fit with everything else. Both skins displayed look especially out of place, so there's a good reason why they chose the original intent design.
I will admit the Overwatch art team honestly does go so much harder than the Team Fortress 2's art team. Like, some of these skins are just... I mean, I understand why people used to grind loot boxes back in the day, bring back loot boxes. But like I said, some of the Overwatch heroes just feel really over-designed, and if they trim certain things back or tried to make them more simple or just like visually appealing instead of just trying to add as much detail and make them look, I guess, futuristic as possible, I think we could have had some better designs. Okay, I've danced around it long enough. How do the Overwatch heroes actually play, and what's good and what's bad? There are characters like Tracer and Widowmaker that solely exist to get picks. They're not meant to necessarily win team fights on their own and be the person to cap objectives, but they're more so able to open up a fight for the team, similar to the sniper and the spy. You have people who are very obviously meant to kind of be pocketed by a healer and push an objective, like basically all tanks are just similar to the heavy in that way, and obviously all of the support characters are just directly inspired by the medic.
I'd say that a lot of supporters could also be inspired by that general archetype of MOBA support characters, but I don't play MOBAs because I don't enjoy self-harm, so I may be wrong on this. Somebody's got to fact-check me in the comments.
One thing we have to talk about is that Team Fortress 2 really only has Uber Charge and certain rage meters that act as like temporary buffs for certain characters. Overwatch has full-on ultimates, which I will talk about later, but I will say a lot of these do add so much to so many characters. A lot of Overwatch characters, honestly, I feel like are pretty basic outside of what their ultimate does sometimes, or their ultimate's a bit basic and it's more fun to play them instead of using the ultimate. It's a hard balance to get, and I get why Blizzard struggles with it, but ultimates are probably the biggest thing about Overwatch. They change literally everything. Without ultimates, Overwatch would be kind of dull. Like, it would still be fun and everything, and some people say the game would be better without ultimates, but matches would be too long and not as exciting. One big ultimate can change the entire fucking tide of an entire match. And so many of them are so iconic. Like, even hardcore Overwatch players still get a little bit excited when like a nano visor or a nano blade is going off, or a big 5-man earth shatter comes out of nowhere. There's so many big plays.
That's not really related to how the ultimates are iconic. Sure, certain plays are very exciting, but that's not really equated with how iconic an ultimate ability is. Again, saying up one day while following it up with another.
And also, the characters having such iconic voice lines and visuals really goes a long way. And I will say, visually in-game, a lot of Overwatch abilities just look insanely satisfying to watch, and a lot of characters look much cooler visually than the Team Fortress 2 characters.
Yes, sometimes effects do look a little flashier in Overwatch. However, a big problem these effects have is the complete destruction of visual clarity. If you show an Overwatch esports game to a medieval peasant, they would just straight up detonate.
But now it's time to talk about, like, meta bullshit. So, Overwatch always has a constant revolving meta. It changes about every, like, month and a half or so, it feels like, and it has for the last 7 years. My biggest problem when it comes to the Overwatch heroes is it feels like there are those heroes that at higher levels of play and even, like, middle levels of play are kind of just required must-picks at every map, every level. For the longest time in Overwatch 2 until kind of recently, it was Kiriko, a brand new Overwatch 2 hero who came out and was mostly designed to, you know, get people to play the game more because look at her. And because she's a support healer who's fun, can do a lot of damage, can teleport out of every situation, can cleanse bad enemy abilities, and has the best ultimate in the game. Bitch can basically do everything. Like, she was kind of a must pick in every situation for the longest time. She just did everything well. There wasn't really a drawback too much to her character. And for like over a year, it was like that. There was just no reason not to play that character. Other play styles may have been more fun for you, like maybe playing a character like an aggressive Brig or Lucio. And obviously, a lot of the time, Blizzard will release a character and it is just OP right out of the gate. I do not need to mention the recent Mauga incident. But then that character gets nerfed more gradually, and then they just go to being like a really low tier, mid-tier pick.
One thing about this nerf cycle is it often ends near the end of a season, which is when the latest battle pass ends, which is when the unlocking method for heroes becomes much more reasonable, because take a guess how Blizzard is trying to make you spend more money. Thankfully, this practice is coming to an end in Season 10. The heroes locked in the Battle Pass, goodbye and good riddance.
It's always been of interest to me how Blizzard used to kind of have more of the philosophy that, well, if every character is overpowered, none of them are. Which Overwatch still kind of has that. Every character kind of can kill people insanely fast and has some sort of ability that on paper is busted.
This part here is just strange, because it seems like there's going to be a but. However, toward this sentence just builds up to nothing, which seems to be a trend in this video. Tons of sentences that try to build up to a greater point, however there's no payoff. He calls out his shift in Overwatch hero design, which the real problem with hero design for me is how overloaded new characters' kits are, with the exception of Venture, with great examples of this being Lifeweaver, Ramatra, and Ilari. They all have a ton of abilities with their own little effects that don't really feel too cohesive. And that's why I feel like Overwatch hero design has been missing.
And that's one great thing about the game. It usually does, most of the time, come down to who is playing better at that character. A lot of the times, all people mirror matching comps, and it just comes down to who's playing better. Whereas Team Fortress 2, it more comes down to what specific plays you're making.
Huh? Like, I don't really get what he's saying here. Isn't making correct plays when your opponent isn't just another part of playing the game better? What does he mean by plays and playing better in the first place? If we're going off the safe assumption that it means raw aim and movement for Overwatch specific planned maneuvers and TF2, is it making good plans part of the overall skill set for any game, therefore playing better than the opponent? Good grief, this video feels incoherent.
Honestly, I don't really have too much of an issue with this when it comes to the characters. I think this method of balancing for both games works. After the new Season 9 update, which I enjoy, the game feels a lot more team-oriented than before, which I do appreciate. But there were characters for the longest time in Overwatch that kind of just felt like if you were doing good, you had one person supporting you, you will just solo carry a match.
I feel like this also happens in TF2 a lot of the time too. Give anyone who's decent at playing a power class medic, and you will see them scorch the earth.
Ability stacking in Overwatch is just something that I don't feel like people talk about as much. Teamwork is the main basis of the game, especially now, but sometimes it almost feels too strong in Overwatch. Like, I know that sounds dumb. If you have like two people, like let's say a wrecking ball that slams down on someone and like an echo who's ready to laser beam them immediately to death, it just feels like they just die instantly because of that teamwork, unless someone saves them with like the greatest reaction times in the world. But that's kind of where the high level play of Overwatch comes in. There are so many ways to just theoretically kill someone instantly and theoretically wipe a team and win a point instantly, but little plays that certain characters can make to save somebody or block an ability, it feels so fun.
The segment is once again disjointed and confusing. He starts off like how dying instantly because the team is a bit stupid, but then spins it around to try to make it a good thing and starts praising how many crazy plays you could make in the game, even though I thought TF2 was more based on the plays you made. I don't know, this video just continues to contradict itself.
I guess it's more for the problem with the casual aspect of the game, though. At the higher ranks, that play feels insanely fun the higher up you go. But at lower ranks, Overwatch really does just kind of feel like a shit slinging competition. It feels more like Team Fortress 2, where just shit's randomly flying by and randomly hitting someone and someone's randomly capping an objective, because honestly, most Team Fortress 2 players aren't as good as most Overwatch players. That's another thing that is great about Team Fortress 2. There can be someone who is the greatest soldier player in the world, and they're just doing insane shit, rocket jumping around, hitting direct hit rockets like it's nothing, getting pocketed at exactly the right time. If someone jumps in their face, they're able just to immediately land 2 perfect rockets and everything. But this person, through a random act of bullshittery, like a random crit, or that one sniper on your team who hasn't done anything, randomly getting a lucky headshot, like everything can change. In Overwatch, this does not happen nearly as much.
Okay, sure. Sometimes a great player can get stopped by someone getting a lucky crit or something. However, it's not nearly as much as this great equalizer situation that he describes. When a great player is dying at a pub, now if they die once, when they're back in action, the massacre will continue. I'd argue this doesn't happen in Overwatch at all, because they're good at Genji is in action, you can just usually force the switch by playing Winston. Also, TF2 matches are not nearly as random as he describes, as while 12 players can be a bit hard to keep track of. Most maps are big enough to facilitate it, you can still gauge the state of the game if you're good enough. Also, I just given up on immensely community competitive formats like Highlander and Sixes, despite that being a better comparison to Overwatch's smaller team sizes.
The game is so dynamic and vast compared to Team Fortress 2, and yes, it makes the skill ceiling much higher, but it's not always as fun. And that is in large part to how the characters are designed. Counter-swapping is the biggest thing in Overwatch 2. A character like Ramatra into Sigma, or like a Bastion into a Winston, it just eats them alive, and there's very little they can do about that. I will say a lot of the time, if your team's helping you, if you have someone covering your weaknesses and playing with you, as a team, you will be unstoppable. But if there's even one person on your team not using their abilities correctly to, secure a kill or, block damage or something or heal somebody, it feels so bad because you often end up just losing entire games for it. Whereas Team Fortress 2, it doesn't feel that way as much. So, for that reason, when it comes down to everything, like the characters' designs, their personality, how they change the game around them, I am actually going to say, as honestly more fun and flashy as the Overwatch heroes are to play and play against, and how they raise the skill ceiling of the game to such a high level, I honestly think I have to give this one to the Team Fortress 2 classes. Mostly for their simplicity, yes.
This entire section was incredibly painful to get through. Most of it was just stating stuff that was said before with nothing too interesting to add to the conversation. The part that finally gets to the main comparison of gameplay is filled with false interpretations and contradictions to the previous points. There are also the statements on how Overwatch being more dynamic and having a higher skill ceiling with their heroes, which I wholeheartedly disagree, especially since he implies multiple times in the previous parts of the video on how TF2 has a higher skill ceiling. But the biggest problem with Big Citrus's analysis of the two games is how shallow it is. The entire TF2 section is listing off basic class roles and interactions, which is fine in a more casual player's video essay on why they like the game, but it's supposed to be some deep dive analysis from an experienced player in both games. A lot of the time he seems more enamored with flashy stuff that doesn't provide too much substance to the game, for the actual fine deal that can make or break the game. Somehow this video just keeps getting worse and worse. But thankfully we're now at the final stretch.
So, what does that leave us at? We're to tire some bullshit? I don't fucking know. Let's talk about those gameplay mechanics. Look, these games are very similar, but also very different when it comes to the actual mechanics and design of the maps. Let's actually start with map design. So this is the point I don't want to stress on too much because I feel like a lot of this kind of is opinionated. Team Fortress 2 fans really do glaze so many of the maps in this game. And I'm gonna be real, it wasn't really fatigue or anything that made me not really like a lot of the maps in Team Fortress 2. I just never really enjoyed playing a lot of the maps in this game. And people really only play the same 2 or 3 half the time. In fact, a lot of the maps they added with the Meet Your Match update and like before that, I honestly prefer because they feel a lot more balanced in terms of attack and defense and just playstyle. Those are my favorite maps in Team Fortress 2. Big Powerhouse and Sujin enjoyer.
These are nothing points to start your argument. Saying that the best maps were from the Meet Your Match update and before means nothing, because that does not narrow it down in the slightest. In fact, that's most of the maps in the game. Secondly, the 2 to 3 typical maps that players gravitate towards is an inevitable part of games where you can select the maps that you want to play. As a Team Fortress 2 devs literally acknowledged this in a dev commentary back in 2007.
Multiplayer communities tend to focus on a small group of maps, playing them over again and again.
I probably think this would be the case with Overwatch if they decide to add map voting, because you know well that most people would instantly vote King's Row if it showed up. But Overwatch isn't going to add this because it's a good feature that everyone would like, so I could only assume. Also, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Having Powerhouse and Sweden as your favorite maps has proved that your taste in maps is absolute garbage. Because of the bloat of Sweden, the excruciating stalemates of Powerhouse, and the sidelines the size of Russia both maps have sure are peak map design. I could rant out Powerhouse particularly all day and night, but we don't have time for that long of a tangent, so let's get back to the point.
The older maps like Dust Bowl and Two Fort I never enjoyed. It feels like they were mostly just testing out what would be strong for certain characters and certain points there than anything else. Have you ever had an actual competitive match of Two Fort, or has it just been random bullshit insanity at the same time? And you might say, well, that's what I want from Team Fortress 2. I want a match that goes on for 45 minutes and randomly ends because someone who was playing Engineer went to go take their laundry out for like 30 seconds and left the objective undefended. I don't know, man. Sometimes it's fun, but it gets old really quickly. And a lot of Team Fortress 2 maps are just way too one play focused. Just one play happens and the entire defense collapses, or the attack is never able to make that one play, so they can't even get on the objective because of how fucking defense-sided the team's composition is and how the points are. Honestly, there's a reason that no one really watches competitive Team Fortress 2 and never did, because even at higher ranks and higher levels of Team Fortress 2, it feels exactly like that. It's a lot of just roll or get rolled. Overwatch does also feel like that sometimes, but I feel like matches are way more competitive and it's way more of like a tug of war as compared to just, you know, someone getting fucking flattened by a steamroller type thing.
First of all, there is no mention of any of the actual maps besides literally 2 of the oldest ones in the game. This frustrates me because there's a pool of great maps that you can't talk about, like Badwater, Thunder Mountain, High Pass, Viaduct, Steel, and Selvian. Just to name a few of my favorites. The point out maps being always one-sided is baffling, as most of the times games can be fun back and forth matches unless the teams are unbalanced. The competitive matches is especially egregious. Most competitive games of TF2 are not as nearly one-sided as the attempt to paint them. If any, there are a lot more complaints about slower mode as there are steamrolls. The finally, the confusion to point out one play being more of a deciding factor in Team Fortress 2 rather than Overwatch. But it's again nebulous on what he means by one play. If we're talking about specific planned maneuvers, that's still a major part of Overwatch's gameplay. Possibly even more that sometimes you need that because healing is so high. Again, this entire script is a mess. I'm also giving up on him mentioning picking certain maps, but it's clear as day this guy is not unbiased.
Team Fortress 2 has always kind of focused on that quirky charm more than anything else. A lot of the time to its strength, but very rarely to its detriment. Like, objectives tick up so fast in Team Fortress 2, it's kind of insane, especially if someone's a scout. I feel like Overtime has gone through a lot of changes in Overwatch, and it's kind of designed a bit perfectly, in my opinion. Defenders don't get to spawn as quickly after they die to actually give the attackers a chance to push that final objective, but also if the attackers get off that objective, the longer the overtime goes on, the less time they have to get back on the objective. It feels fair to both sides. Whereas in Team Fortress 2, it's kind of like that. It also just feels like random and it kind of like goes on too long.
Out of every opinion in this video, there's none so far than this wrong. How do you manage to get things so backwards? First, let's cover the objective time cap thing. The main reason why the objective is that fast in the first place is to make sure that people pay attention to the objective in this objective-based game. It's kind of a meme in Overwatch that nobody wants to push the payload, but why does nobody want to do it? It's because it feels incredibly unrewarding. It barely visibly moves, there's no feedback for pushing it, you're not really rewarded with anything for doing it outside of winning the game, unlike with kills or heals which increase your stats on the leaderboard. Contrast this with TF2, which very clearly shows your progress capturing a point. It gives you direct audio feedback for doing your part. And capturing the points of the first round gives you twice the points on the leaderboard for just killing someone. No joke, my first ever top score in TF2 was just glued to the payload. You also get points in additional kill feed notification for defending a point too, so you have an incentive to play defense, along with the fact that the objective cap speed is decently fast. It's not just about making players care about the objective, though. TF2 also has a lot stronger defensive set plays, such as sticky traps and sentry guns. I mean, if it took as long as Overwatch to count a point, the game would be two defender side. This is why the last points at the control point maps take so much faster to capture. Otherwise, it would be just unwinnable for the attackers. Now we're done talking about capture speed and why it's fast enough in TF2. Let's talk about overtime. I'm just going to level with you. While overtime in TF2 can occasionally feel annoying, in Overwatch it's downright cartoonish how long it can go for. Then again, this isn't really because of how Overwatch's overtime system is designed, but rather how the map design and overwhelming amount of sustain creates these unbearable dog piles on the objective. Also, this comment on TF2's overtime system feeling random makes no sense, because it's completely consistent on how it activates. When the timer has run out but the control point is still in process of being captured, it activates, and it runs out when the control point is completely uncontested, or it's been 5 seconds since someone on the attacking team touched the card. Once again, Big Citrus displays a complete lack of understanding about TF2.
Like I said, a lot of the maps in Team Fortress 2 feel way too defense or way too attack-sided as compared to the maps in Overwatch, which usually feel fair. Even on the more defense-sided maps, there's usually some sort of weakness in the defense side of it. Team Fortress 2 kind of functions the same way, but in Team Fortress 2, it feels a lot less because your team did like a well-coordinated high-level play and just some completely kind of random bullshit happened.
From experience, this is just untrue. A push usually happens after a failed push from the enemy or a strategic attack on a sentry, allowing a lot more of the classes to go in for the kill. It may seem random, however someone with good enough game sense will be able to capitalize on a defender falling. As Sun Tzu once said, in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity.
And sometimes that comes down to random crits. Okay, look, I kind of said it earlier in the video, I'm going to say it again. I think in the context of Team Fortress 2, random crits work well. They can serve as a means to loosen the death grip a defending team has on an enemy objective. It can just be a funny, wacky moment where you randomly smack somebody with a frying pan and they just die instantly. Or for a player who's kind of just having a rough time to get that one kill that makes them feel good and you get them back into the match. And the context of the wacky TF2 where you have weapons where you can make people fly across the map. You get a pyro who just randomly has a flamethrower that only does crits, a sniper who's just shooting you with piss bullets and making you marked for death. There's so much wacky bullshit in Team Fortress 2 that honestly, I think it does kind of make sense in that game. However, as a competitive game that people take seriously, random crits should never be in it, but that's not the kind of game Team Fortress 2 is.
For the last time, Random crits are not enabled in competitive formats, so if you're looking for a competitive game in TF2, random crits are completely irrelevant. Also, for someone talking about how TF2 isn't really a competitive game at its core, Big Citrus does like judging TF2 as if it was. Of course, the game is designed to be a competitive sweatfest and is more tailored for competitive play in esports than a game designed for you to enjoy yourself after a long day of work. What else did you expect? It's like judging Halo on how good of a high-speed boomer shooter it is, or how well Overwatch would function as a casual game. If you judge a killer whale based on its ability to climb a tree, of course you wouldn't see it as a fierce predator.
Also, another thing we have to talk about that I mentioned all, Team Fortress 2 has limited ammo and health packs, and I honestly think Overwatch did this concept much better. The positioning of health packs on Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch is good. I think it's good in both games. But a lot of the time with Team Fortress 2, I feel like ammo packs are kind of sparse, especially in a game that has limited ammo, especially when you have characters like the Engineer who constantly need it. Or in Overwatch, you have unlimited ammo and health packs come back more consistently, which I honestly prefer.
This section is just one out of many that completely gets basic facts wrong. To start us off, Team Fortress 2's health and ammo packs are consistent. Once someone takes them, they spawn again 10 seconds later. You cannot get more consistent than completely consistent. This is just plain ignorance. Our second order of business here is how he feels to mention the upper main way of getting ammo, which is, killing enemy players. Not only does it make ammo packs count if you know what you're doing, it also encourages both teams to be aggressive. If you just stay back and chip dance at enemies in TF2, guess what? You'll eventually run out of ammo. But, if you decide to man up and go into the bloodbath, you'll get more ammo to continue your slaughter. This is further encouraged by a near universal presence of damage fall-off, which means the best way to play most of the time is to be active rather than to stay back, unless you're a Sniper or Engineer, which are two classes literally made to stay back. Also, the fact that he mentions the Engineer while failing to consider why this system is in place continues to show his sheer ignorance or stupidity. I don't know which one it is at this point. Limited ammo that is partially tied to that makes sure the Engineer needs to pay attention to his resources and set up at good locations, and his gameplay would be far more boring if he had unleaded metal. Same with the Spy. The feeling of barely managing to extend your invisibility with an ammo pack will always be incredibly satisfying, and taking this aspect away would make him far less exciting to play. Case in point, the Cloak and Dagger's existence. It is also good for the Pyro and Heavy, because while you have a large ammo pool and never have to reload, you must be careful of how you use your weapon, because if you spend all your ammo chipping away at the enemy or just air blasting projectiles, you'll eventually run out and be forced to refill. The ammo system also generally encourages map movement, as you'll want to go down paths you normally wouldn't take so you can continue to fight. Main point is, ammo good.
And with a game like 20 people, when everyone's waiting around for a health pack or an ammo pack because no one wants to play medic or engineer, it just feels shitty.
I feel this is a misrepresentation of the general game flow of TF2. While medics being uncommon is agreeable, I don't think the same applies for engineer. Also, there's just a lot more health and ammo packs scattered across the map in TF2, so usually you could snag that quick refill while waiting for too long.
Overwatch also has actual, dedicated roles like tank, DPS, and support. Team Fortress 2 does kind of, but they're all interchangeable in a way. And I honestly do prefer Overwatch's, design philosophy behind that. And the no-limit system, yeah, works decently for Team Fortress 2, but it leads to matches often feeling kind of just, again, like random bullshit happening when there's 5.
Personally, I despise Overwatch's design philosophy that designates every single character into a box from when they're made, as you often get more overlap and the playstyles tend to be a lot more restrictive. In TF2, on the other hand, the characters have a lot more distinctive roles while also allowing flexibility in playstyle, meaning that if you have multiple of the same class, these players can play in very different ways. Speaking of class tagging, I think it's almost always better to let the players do their own thing instead of forcing them down a specific playstyle for the entire map. Role queue is just very dreadful in how it forces people into a box playstyle, and if you have someone in a different role playing better and they know it, you can't do a gentleman switch to do his role better. You can say, oh, just play open queue, but at that point, it spells completely differently from the main game because of 5v5 causing a natural imbalance between roles, And 5v5 was added because Q times for DPS were insanely high because of roll Q, and Blizzard not knowing how to make support and tank fun. Why was roll Q added? Because Blizzard didn't know how to balance their game and a game-breaking hero in their game for an entire year when a typical balance crisis happens for a week or so. I also hate how it guts creative team compositions that may use unconventional strategies and once again forces you into a box. Main point is, roll Q is the matchmaking equivalent of pineapple on pizza. Absolutely horrific, yet you still have a ton of people defending it.
Also, Team Fortress 2 has that lovely auto-balance feature, which honestly, I kinda get why it exists, but it is a shitty feeling when you're doing really well in a match and then you randomly get auto-balanced to the other side. But also, it's nice to see that one person who's been absolutely destroying your team suddenly get put on your team, and then now they have to start trying for your team, and the other team has to adjust very quickly to this new change. So it's a blessing and a curse. Overwatch just doesn't have anything like that, so.
I'd like to argue for a bit that it's not getting auto-bounce while performing well that feels bad. In most scenarios, if you're at the top of your old team and carrying, you'll still carry on the enemy team, and that feeling is absolutely amazing, carrying two teams at once. No, the real pain of auto-bounce comes from a dread yet inevitable last-second auto-bounce. You've helped your team so much to this point if you've come this far, only for the game to switch you into the enemy team so you lose to no fault of your own. Otherwise, this section is agreeable.
I do appreciate, though, that Team Fortress 2 actually does have maps and game modes that feel like they're meant to support multiple players and everything. Sometimes Overwatch maps are a little bit too big. For the 6v6 format worked better, but ever since they changed the game to 5v5, sometimes it feels a lot more empty, and one death in an Overwatch match feels so impactful, sometimes kind of to its detriment, because sometimes you do kind of just die to random shit in Overwatch. It's rare. That one death often changes the tide of a match, and you can say, well, it makes Overwatch feel more skill-based, but Overwatch isn't like Team Fortress 2. It's not designed for the whole randomness factor, because when you lose one teammate, especially if it's like a healer or your tank typically, it can just crumble super fast. Which, like, yes, that does, I guess in a way, make Overwatch a more skill-based, more focus all the time game. For a casual player, I can understand why Team Fortress 2's philosophy would be more fun for them.
This section is a mess to go through, since it's an active contradiction. First, a death spiral in Overwatch is random, but then it's skill-based? Those two aren't compatible. Which one is it? Also, once again, the continued switching between TF2 players are worse than Overwatch players, and TF2 players are sweat lords still doesn't make any sense. And yes, I know, sweat doesn't equal skill, but you usually don't call people that you win against a bunch of sweat lords. Thank goodness this nightmare is ending soon.
If I'm going to really split hairs, I'm going to say that when it comes to the design of everything, of which game works better as a PvP multiplayer video game, the way that the characters interact with one another, and the way matches are structured, I'm going to say that Overwatch is marginally better, simply due to the fact that it feels like a more modern video game compared to Team Fortress 2, which still feels really archaic. So, there you go.
You know, I mostly appreciate when things go full circle. It always seems quite fitting for the ending to be foreshadowed from the start, and when a story goes back to its roots. And this video manages to connect the ending back to the beginning, by making the same idiotic argument as mentioned at the start of the first section, while elaborating on what it means to be archaic. Okay, can I have a spill of this cream into? Well, at least this section was shorter than the last one. But that's why a minor upside, because the argumentation and general interpretation of the game mechanics is confusing at best and infuriating to listen to at worst. How do you manage to have such little fundamental understanding of both games you've played for thousands of hours? Make it make sense. At least during the previous sections, I can slightly understand where Big Citrus was coming from, but here it feels like I've been transported to another dimension where nothing makes sense. How did this script get made? Was there even a script? How did someone say all this, look at it editing, and thought, yep, this makes perfect sense? I'm done here. Let's just move on to my closing thoughts. I'm not sugarcoating it. This was just an awful video. And before anyone asks why I'm not covering the conclusion, it's because it doesn't really make any points that are relevant here. You can guess what game he favors by the point system. Anyways, I think I could say by now that this video isn't really an objective look at both games, but rather he used this as a pretext to try to shield himself from criticism. He gets a lot of basic facts completely wrong, fails to investigate any of the nuances of anything, or try to explain why certain game mechanics are besides, oh, it's a casual game. His subjective interpretations seem to be found a complete nonsense. A lot of the seconds just don't make sense either as a main point. Like the competitive game aspect can be completely flipped on its head to be a point towards Team Fortress 2, since I know plenty of people who would rather take games less seriously. Heck, the scoring system barely makes any sense either, like he makes some sections more valuable than others. Like, why are gameplay mechanics valued less than being a competitive game? But that's besides the point. It's clear this video wasn't researched very well, as the production value of this video shows there wasn't much care into making anything. Which leads us into what I think this video really exposes the true flaw of a lot of his other works. Big Citrus is kind of self-absorbed. I know this may sound like an overreach, a stretch, reading into this too much, whatever, but bear with me here. This entire video comes from a point of self-importance, as he declares himself to be the best person to make this type of video and declares it to be the final video that needs to be made on the subject, really pushing that his opinion is worth more than literally everyone else. A lot of the weird quirks in the edit would probably cut to the fact that he either doesn't receive the proper criticism to correct it, or he doesn't listen to it. Which one is more likely? You decide. There's also the constant plugging of his other videos in social media, where at the end of this video, he plugs one of his songs for some reason. Keep in mind, these traits aren't just relegated to this single video. The express of self-importance is a microcosm of his videos as a whole. So if there's anything to take away from this video, it's the importance of valuing it, creating a high quality of product, and making sure you don't become deluded by pride. Otherwise, you end up with a video that fails to properly explain any points or say much of anything meaningful. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.